The day you found me in that cardboard box behind Maguire's pharmacy, I wasn't expecting salvation. I was expecting the end. Some cats might start their story with purrs and happy memories, but I need you to understand something first, Ellen. Those early mornings when you'd find me staring at you from across the bedroom, I wasn't judging you. I was memorizing you. Every line on your face, every silver strand in your auburn hair, the way your breathing changed just before you woke. I've spent 9 years studying the landscape of your existence, knowing my time to do so was limited. Now that my paws no longer press against your quilted bedspread, there are things you deserve to know. They called me feral when you found me. Unsocialized, the vet tech whispered when she thought I couldn't hear. Unlikely to bond, the shelter volunteer warned when you insisted on taking me anyway. I heard it all from inside that carrier you brought, the one with the frayed corner I immediately started chewing. What none of them knew was that I understood English perfectly well by then. 3 different homes before the age of 2 will teach a cat many languages, especially the dialect of disappointment. My name is Jasper, though you tried calling me Winston first. Remember how I refused to acknowledge it? You thought I was being stubborn. The truth was simpler. I'd been Jasper to the elderly man in the brick house on Sycamore Street, the one who fed me scraps and called me Old Soul before his children moved him to a facility where cats weren't welcome. Winston felt like erasing the only person who'd been kind to me before you. 3 days later, you looked into my eyes and said, "You're not a Winston, are you? You look more like a Jasper." I blinked slowly at you, the first time I'd shown trust. You didn't know it, but you'd recognized something essential about me. I began to hope cautiously that this home might be different. I wasn't always easy to love, Ellen. Those first months, I hid beneath your writing desk, emerging only when you were asleep. I couldn't help it. The Thompsons had seemed kind too until their new baby arrived and I became an afterthought, then a nuisance, then gone. Before them, there was the young couple who argued constantly, their voices driving me under furniture until the day they packed separate suitcases and left me with an open bag of food and an empty apartment. When the landlord found me 2 weeks later, I'd learned that humans leave. It's what they do. You never knew that I spent those early nights in your house planning escape routes. The loose screen in the guest room window, the slight gap beneath the back door when the weather stripped away, the tree branch that nearly touched your bedroom balcony. I memorized them all, certain the day would come when I'd need them. What changed? It wasn't one moment, but many small ones. Like that rainy Tuesday when you found me huddled on the porch, having finally tested my escape theory during a thunderstorm. You didn't scold or chase me. You just sat on the wet steps beside me, getting soaked yourself, talking softly until I chose to follow you back inside. Or the morning you discovered I'd knocked over and shattered your mother's ceramic bluebird, the one keepsake you had from her Savannah childhood. I expected rage, punishment, abandonment. Instead, you swept up the pieces, set them in a small dish, and later I found you gluing them together at the kitchen table, tears streaming down your face. "It's just a thing," you whispered, though I knew it wasn't. When you noticed me watching, you smiled through your tears and said, "It's not your fault, Jasper. You're just being a cat." That was the first night I slept on your bed, though I stayed at the very corner, just in case. Our routines became my security. The way you'd shuffle to the kitchen each morning, wearing those blue slippers with the worn spots on the heels. How you'd pour your coffee, black, no sugar, into the same chipped mug with the painted cardinals. You'd sit in the rocking chair by the eastern window, watching the sun rise over the Pocono foothills, sometimes reading, sometimes just breathing. I began joining you there, first on the floor nearby, then on the windowsill, and finally in your lap. You'd stroke between my ears with one finger, so gently, like I might break. I wanted to tell you then that I was stronger than I looked. We both were. You never knew how carefully I tracked your moods. The days your arthritis flared, I'd notice the slight wince when you reached for things. I'd stay closer those days, sensing your need for quiet companionship. The evenings when you'd receive calls from your daughter in Seattle, the ones that left you staring into space afterward, I'd climb onto the arm of your chair and press my head against your shoulder. You thought it was coincidence. It wasn't. Our small town of Greensboro wasn't much to look at, just a stretch of Main Street with the hardware store, post office, and Lena's diner where you'd bring home turkey scraps for me every Thursday. But it was ours. Through the front window, I watched the seasons change over Pine Creek, the water rushing in spring and barely trickling by August. I observed Mrs. Abernathy walking her ancient beagle each morning at precisely 7:15, Mr. Dillard delivering mail with his uneven gait, and the Sullivan children catching the school bus at the corner, growing taller each September. The neighbors thought you were eccentric, the retired librarian who talked to her cat as if I understood every word. "How's my handsome man today?" you'd ask each morning. "What should we have for dinner, Jasper?" You'd ponder aloud while opening the refrigerator. "What do you think of this chapter?" you'd question after reading aloud from the children's book you were writing. Little did they know that our conversations were the most honest ones in town. I answered you in my own way, a slow blink, a chirp, the flick of my tail. And somehow, miraculously, you often understood. Do you remember the winter of the great ice storm? 3 days without power, the temperature dropping inside until we could see our breath. You piled every blanket on the bed, and we stayed there together. You reading paperbacks by flashlight, me curled against your side. You fed me portions of your tuna sandwiches, though I knew you were rationing food carefully. At night, the house creaked and groaned under the weight of ice, and I felt your hand trembling slightly as you stroked my fur. "At least we have each other, Jasper," you whispered into the darkness. That was when I knew I would never leave you by choice. The seasons of our life together blur in my memory now. A tapestry of sunbeams where I napped on the carpet, summer evenings on the screened porch listening to crickets, winters curled by the wood stove. But there are moments that stand out with perfect clarity, like the day you brought home that ridiculous cat tree that took up half the living room. It was on sale, you explained to no one in particular, though we both knew you'd splurged. I sniffed it suspiciously for days before finally climbing to the top platform where I could survey our kingdom. You clapped your hands like a child when I did, and the joy on your face made me wish I'd done it sooner. You never realized how closely I monitored your health. The spring you developed that persistent cough, I noticed weeks before you admitted it to yourself. The way you'd pause on the stairs, catching your breath. How you'd wake in the night trying to suppress the sound so you wouldn't disturb me. I started sleeping closer to your face then, partly to comfort you, partly to track your breathing. When you finally saw Dr. Lemon, I knew from your scent when you returned that something was wrong. You sat in your chair for hours that evening, not reading, not knitting, just staring out at the darkening yard. I pushed my head beneath your hand until you began to pet me mechanically. When the tears finally came, I stayed perfectly still, letting them fall into my fur. The medication changed you. Not dramatically, but in subtle ways I catalogued meticulously. Your morning routine started later. Your hands trembled slightly when measuring my food. Some days you'd forget to open the curtains, and we'd sit in half darkness until afternoon. I adapted. We both did. I began reminding you of things, standing by my empty bowl at mealtimes, pawing at the curtains until you remembered to open them, leading you to bed when I sensed your exhaustion. We never discussed this shift in responsibilities. We didn't need to. I wish you could have understood what was happening to me as well. The day I misjudged the jump onto the counter and fell awkwardly to the floor, you fussed over me for hours. But you couldn't see what I felt inside. The stiffness that wouldn't go away, the subtle pain when I moved too quickly. I became more careful then, calculating each leap with precision, napping more frequently to conserve energy. Age was changing us both, but you worried about yours aloud while I kept my complaints to myself. It seemed the least I could do. There were visitors, of course. Your sister Margaret, who came every third Sunday bringing those almond cookies I wasn't supposed to have, but which you slipped to me anyway when she wasn't looking. The book club ladies who gathered in the living room monthly, their voices rising and falling like waves as they debated plot lines and characters. I observed them all from various perches, the top of the bookshelf, the back of the sofa, the window seat. Most paid me little attention, which suited me fine, except for Ruth, with her gentle hands and pockets that smelled of catnip treats. For her I made exceptions to my usual reserve. What you never suspected was how much these gatherings exhausted you. I'd watch the color drain from your face as the hours passed, notice how your sentences grew shorter, less animated. When they finally left, you'd sink into your chair with a sigh that contained both relief and loneliness. Those were the evenings I'd make a special effort to stay close, to purr a little louder, to knead your lap until you smiled again. The day your daughter Melissa visited with her husband and their new baby was particularly difficult. You cleaned for days beforehand, moving furniture that was too heavy for you, climbing stepladders you had no business being on. I followed you anxiously from room to room, meowing my disapproval. When you nearly fell hanging new curtains, I yowled so loudly that you finally sat down, breathing heavily. "You're right," you conceded. "They're not coming to inspect the house." But we both knew you wanted everything to be perfect. They stayed for 3 days that felt like 3 weeks. The baby cried at night, disrupting our sleep. Unfamiliar suitcases blocked my favorite pathways. Your attention was divided in ways that left me feeling adrift. Worst of all, your daughter watched with obvious disapproval when you let me on the kitchen counter, when you fed me scraps from your plate, when you kissed the top of my head before bed. "Mom, cats carry germs," she said, in that patronizing tone that made your shoulders tense. I saw the hurt in your eyes, the way you struggled not to defend our habits that probably did seem strange to outsiders. After they left, you sat on the porch swing for hours, rocking slowly, saying nothing. I waited until dusk before joining you, sensing you needed solitude. When I finally jumped into your lap, you buried your face in my fur and whispered, "It's just you and me, isn't it, old boy?" Your tears felt hot against my neck. I purred and pressed closer, trying to absorb your sadness. That night, for the first time, you carried me to bed in your arms instead of waiting for me to follow. The last year brought changes neither of us was prepared for. The day you stumbled in the garden and couldn't get up remains vivid in my memory. I circled you frantically, meowing, unsure how to help as you tried repeatedly to stand. When you began calling for help, I ran to the front yard, something I rarely did, and meowed as loudly as possible until Mrs. Livingston from next door heard and came to investigate. Later, at the hospital, they told you it was a mild stroke, but nothing about it felt mild to me during those weeks of your absence. Melissa came to take care of me, filling my bowl mechanically, forgetting to change my water, never opening the blinds the way I liked. I retreated to your bedroom, spending most days curled on your pillow, surrounded by your fading scent. When you finally returned, you moved differently, slower, more deliberate, with a cane that made unfamiliar tapping sounds on the hardwood floors. Your left hand didn't work properly anymore. The first time you tried to open my food can and couldn't manage it, I saw something in your eyes I'd never witnessed before: defeat. That began our final chapter together, though neither of us recognized it then. The home health aide who came 3 times weekly, Teresa with her loud voice and gentle hands, disrupted our routines but brought a steady presence that allowed you to stay in our home. I adjusted, making myself scarce during her visits, emerging only when she left. You noticed, apologizing to me as if the intrusion were your fault. "It won't be forever, Jasper," you promised. But we both sensed the uncertainty in those words. My own health was failing too, though I hid it as best I could. The litter box became a challenge some days. My appetite waned, though I forced myself to eat when I saw the worry in your eyes. The jump to your bed became impossible, so I waited each night for you to notice and lift me up. You never failed to do so, even on your worst days. "Up we go, old friend," you'd murmur, your hands shaking with the effort. Sometimes I feared you'd drop me, or worse, fall yourself. But somehow we managed this new ritual with what dignity we could muster. The morning I couldn't stand was the day everything changed. You found me lying beside my water bowl, unable to rise, my breathing labored. The panic in your voice as you called Teresa, then the veterinarian, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't something that would pass. Your hands trembled as you wrapped me in my favorite blanket, the soft blue one that smelled of both of us, and held me while Teresa drove us to Dr. Parker's office. You whispered the entire way, your lips against my ear, promises we both knew you couldn't keep. "You'll be home by dinner, Jasper. Just a little medicine, that's all you need." The examination room was cold and smelled of antiseptic and fear. Other animals had received bad news in this room. I could sense their lingering distress. Dr. Parker had always been kind to me, her hands gentle and voice soft. But that day her face told the story before her words did. Kidney failure. Advanced. No treatment would reverse it. Only suffering lay ahead. You argued at first, asking about special diets, medications, anything. Your voice rose and cracked as the options dwindled. I wished I could tell you it was okay, that 9 years with you had been more than I ever expected from this life. Instead, I summoned my remaining strength to purr when you held me, hoping you would understand. The hardest part wasn't the decision itself, it was watching you try to be brave for me. You've always been strongest when you thought I needed you to be. As Dr. Parker explained the procedure, you nodded calmly, stroking my fur with steady fingers, though I could smell the salt of tears you were fighting to contain. When she asked if you wanted time alone with me, you finally broke, sobbing into my fur, apologizing over and over. For what? For being human? For not being able to prevent the inevitable? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, you whispered, your face close to mine. I blinked slowly, deliberately, the way I'd done since our first days together. I love you, I trust you, it's okay to let go. When Dr. Parker returned, you asked to hold me through it. They placed a blanket on your lap, and you cradled me against your chest, my head tucked beneath your chin where I could hear your heartbeat. As the sedative began to work, making my limbs heavy and my thoughts fuzzy, I focused on that sound, the rhythm that had been my security and comfort for nearly a decade. The last thing I felt was your tear falling onto my fur and your whispered words, "Thank you for choosing me, Jasper." What happens after is something I can't properly explain, not in a way that would make sense to you. There's no rainbow bridge or heavenly meadow, at least not that I've found. Instead, there's a curious kind of presence, a lingering awareness. I'm still in our house, in a sense, not as a ghost or spirit, but as something woven into the fabric of the place we shared. I notice things you might not, how you still pause before pouring your morning coffee, as if waiting for my familiar figure to appear at your feet. The way you sometimes set your fork down mid-bite, glancing toward my empty food bowl in the corner. I see you reach to brush cat hair from your black pants, though it's been months since any was there. These small gestures of memory comfort me somehow. The day you finally packed away my things was necessary, though painful to witness. My blue blanket, carefully folded and placed in a cedar chest. The ceramic food bowl, washed one final time and wrapped in tissue paper. The collar with the small silver bell you'd insisted on, though we both knew I was too cautious to ever need it. As you touched each item, your fingers lingered, and I wished I could press my head against your hand one more time. Ruth from your book club brought you a kitten last week, a small orange tabby with white paws and boundless energy. You refused at first, shaking your head firmly. "It's too soon," you told her. But she left him anyway, just for the weekend, she claimed. I watched you maintain your distance that first day, speaking to him only when necessary, avoiding his playful advances. By Sunday morning, though, he had scaled the barricade around your heart. I saw it happen when he fell asleep on your chest during your afternoon nap, his small body rising and falling with your breath. Your hand came up to stroke his fur automatically, and the smile that crossed your face held both sadness and possibility. You named him Oliver, after the character in that children's book you finally finished writing, the one about a library cat who helps lost children find their way home. It's a good name for him. He's nothing like me, this kitten. He's fearless where I was cautious, vocal where I was silent, demanding where I was patient. But he makes you laugh, Ellen. Deep, genuine laughter that I haven't heard since before your stroke. He needs you in ways I no longer can. Don't worry that loving him somehow diminishes what we shared. I'm not jealous of Oliver. How could I be? He's giving you something I no longer can, the warm weight of a living being, the vibration of a purr against your chest, the silent companionship through long evening hours. He'll have his own relationship with you, different from ours but no less valuable. And in teaching him your routines, you keep parts of me alive too. I still visit you in dreams sometimes. At least I think that's what happens when your breathing changes at night and you whisper my name in your sleep. In these moments, I try to convey what words never could, that you were my person, my safe place, my home, that every slow blink, every headbutt against your hand, every night spent curled against you, was my way of saying what I'm trying to tell you now. They say animals don't understand love the way humans do. Perhaps that's true. What I felt for you existed beyond language, in rituals and presence in the spaces between words, in the way I knew your footsteps from anyone else's, in how I could sense your moods before you expressed them, in the perfect trust that let me sleep deeply beside you, vulnerable and unafraid. Spring is returning to Greensboro. From wherever I am now, I notice the purple crocuses pushing through the soil in the garden bed beneath your bedroom window, the ones that always made you smile after long winters. The maple tree in the backyard is budding, promising summer shade for the porch swing where we spent so many evenings. Life continues its cycle with or without us. When you sit in your rocking chair now, watching the sunrise with Oliver exploring the windowsill where I once perched, know that something of me lingers in that moment. Not in some mystical way, but in the habits we formed together, the spaces we shared, the silence we found comfortable, in how you automatically leave room beside you on the bed, even now, in the way certain sunbeams still look like perfect cat-napping spots to your eyes. I was just a cat, an ordinary tabby with a crooked tail and cautious nature, but to you I was family, companion, confidant. You gave me more than food and shelter. You gave me belonging. If love is measured by how completely one is seen, then you loved me entirely. And I, in my feline way, loved you with every purr, every slow blink, every night spent guarding your sleep. Remember me not with sadness, Ellen, but with the quiet joy we found in ordinary moments. In morning light through kitchen windows, in the perfect weight of a cat in your lap on cold evenings, in the silent understanding that sometimes passes between souls who have chosen each other. I am still with you, in memory, in habit, in the spaces between heartbeats. And somehow I think that's enough. Always yours, Jasper.